My name is Heather Fomin. I am the AVP for Enrollment here at the New School. I oversee the admission teams for Eugene Lang College, the New School for Social Research, the schools for professional engagement, or public engagement rather, as well as our operations and systems teams. It's my pleasure once again to moderate this panel that we've assembled for you today to get out in front of some questions we think you may have about choices, about attending the new school, what that means for your family together, for your student in particular as they prepare over the summer months to come to campus. And then, of course, we'll spend the majority of the time entertaining what's on your mind. Because as much as we think we know what that you have on your mind, we won't really know until we hear it from you first. So if we could have our panelists introduce themselves first, and while we're getting settled, and then we'll begin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Whistler, and I'm the Senior Director for Student and Campus Life here at the New School. So my portfolio oversees housing and residential education, so all of the residence halls on campus, orientation and transition programs, and student leadership and involvement.
Good morning. My name is Kevin Williams. I am the Assistant Vice President and Dean of Students. So I am the dean over all students through all the different schools. My portfolio consists of working directly with Travis on all the housing, residence life, activities, stuff outside of the classroom. I also oversee all the global and international affairs components, also work with our Title IX, veterans, disabilities offices, and then oversee the university's crisis response system, including our care team, where we think about support services and access to those support services for our students to help them be successful out of the classroom.
Hey everybody, my name is Keisha Davenport Ramirez. I am the Senior Director of Academic and Career Advising, working with Eugene Lang and the advising staff at Eugene Lang. And also led out of my office is the university's partnership with the New York State Department of Education, the Higher Education Opportunity Program, or what some more commonly referred to as HEOP, and the New School's initiative to work with and target programming toward first-generation students called New School First.
Hello, my name's Devin. I'm a third-year bassoon student at COPA, and I'm here to kind of give you what it's like student life, what student life is like in my point of view. All right.
Great. So my one and only question for the group before the parents get their turn is, from where you sit and the work that you and your team do, how do you prepare for students' arrival, and what do you do when they come to campus to help them make the transition in the first week to the first few months of their time here as a student here?
Okay, I'll go first. What do we do to prepare for student arrival? We actually do a lot because we are going to be in communication with the family members that you're going to have joining us here at the New School about registering for classes. And so our registration process looks a little bit like this. Soon after May 1st, which is the universal deadline for deposit, when everybody's going to deposit and say they're coming to Eugene Lang, yay, we will then be reaching out to the students and letting them know who their student success advisor is, and we'll start to educate them on what it will be like during their first year here. So a little bit about the Lang curriculum, what are the requirements that students have to take. There are no gen ed requirements as part of the Lang curriculum, but there are a couple of course requirements that need to be met during the first year, and so we share out that information with students, and we also then help them understand what the registration process is going to look like. And so we're doing that May through late June, turning out registration schedules in July, and talking to students all throughout that period, in person or through Zoom appointments, and Zoom is like Skype appointments, or through phone appointments. So we're definitely working with students very soon after the deposit deadline and all the way through the summer. How we're then working with them and helping them transition when we get here is staying in conversation with them about their schedule, making sure that they're registered for the classes that they need and or want, and then also talking about what it's going to be like to be a first-year Lang student academically, and talking about the kind of relationship we want to have with them as their advising support. There is another level of advising support for Lang first-year students. When students register for what's called the first-year seminar, the instructor that teaches that seminar is their faculty advisor. So there's what we like to call sort of a circle or a web of support of people who are really invested in working with first-year students. There's also a peer mentor that's assigned to that course that works with the faculty person and the students. So there are about, roughly 3 designated types of advisors, as well as the other faculty people that students are going to be coming in contact with. So that's how we work with them in the very beginning.
From the housing perspective, so priority deadline for housing for deposits and applications is May 8th, so just 1 week after the universal deadline. And so for housing students, they will get notification at the end of June on what their housing assignment is. And so we typically house folks as kind of a collective unit within their schools. That way they're going through the same curriculum, same experiences together. We find that that seems to work best so far. And then once we get closer to orientation, which happens in August, that will kind of be our time to all come together within a student body. So orientation is a week-long process, and the first few days are all collectives, all students from all schools together. And then the later part of the week, we turn it over to be individual school-specific. That way they can get acclimated there. Throughout that week, though, there's a lot of programming that takes place on campus, more socially based, just to get them connected and kind of get acclimated to the city. So we take folks to movies or to bowling. We've done Broadway shows in the past just to kind of get folks engaged and connected, since New York can be a little overwhelming the first couple of weeks.
What I did as a first-year student, I was woefully unprepared. So my first step was to reach out to my academic advisors and my student success advisors, just so I could figure things out in terms of, will I be able to work? What kind of resources are at my disposal in terms of acclimating to the city? Stuff like that. Like I said, I was unprepared. I didn't really have housing when I came here. I didn't have any money coming in. So reaching out to student success and my academic advisor, I was able to stabilize my life in the first couple weeks here, which was great. They found me affordable housing outside of the campus. They helped me, they even gave me stipends for food when I couldn't afford it. These people are really here to make you succeed. That's literally their job, and they like it and they're good at it. So I would recommend reaching out before it becomes an emergency, for sure.
That's great. My job is to help bring all of that together. And right now what we're looking at is a lot of policies and procedures and communications that will support students in thinking about ways in which we communicate that to them and to you as parents. You're our partners. So before we go too far, can we just give a round of applause for the parents and all that they have done thus far? Give a round of applause for yourself. This is your journey also, and our job right now is to help you figure out what exactly you do need, what does your student need, what are those questions, and help answer those so that when you arrive, you have about 95% of the answers, because some of that's going to happen when your student and you arrive in the fall. And so my role is to think about what are the ways that we streamline that and make sure that your student and you are prepared for that.
Great. If you all had one piece of advice to give parents who are preparing for the first time, or maybe not the first time, to see a student off to college, what would it be?
So I just did this myself this time last year. So enjoy first. Let's just say. It's a lot less dishes. A lot less dishes. What I often tell students, first-year students that I have the pleasure of working with, is that this is not a journey that you start, travel through, or finish alone. And so, communication is just key, really, really key. And so over the course of the next couple of weeks, as you prepare for whatever your transition is going to look like, start thinking about how you want to communicate with your family member moving forward, because they are going to change and they're going to be different, and sometimes they're going to feel the same to you, but they're not going to feel the same to themselves, not at all. And so really sort of think about the ways in which you'd communicate with them as they mature into adults. Texting and emailing, not expecting phone calls on a regular basis is really helpful. Managing expectations is also really helpful, but also learning about the institution, like using the web resources to learn about the institution. But once you get that knowledge, not necessarily giving it to them, but really directing them to their opportunity to use the resources. So instead of saying, I'll call your advisor, maybe you say, you know what, I was looking online and I saw how you could reach your advisor. You can find it on this particular webpage, or I wrote down his or her email, and I'm happy to give you that. But you should email them and ask them the questions that you're confused about or that you're asking me. So just to work on how to communicate with them.
I would have you encourage your students to encourage them to check their emails throughout the summer. I know it sounds simple, but it's not a text. And so checking emails is definitely a little different, but so much, multiple times a day, all the communication. So there's lots of communication that gets sent out with a lot of detailed information for like a one-stop shop within their new school email account. So really encourage them to check there first for any sort of resources or questions that they might have.
I'd just like to elaborate on what Keisha said. Let us make mistakes, to a point, of course. But now's the time for us to figure out how to deal with life on life's terms. So if you give us the opportunity to make those mistakes, we also learn how to make solutions for those mistakes, which has changed the game, at least for me. So
I think it's similar. Listen to them, be that sounding board for them, but also challenge them back to this communication piece to try to figure some of this out on their own, or to identify and tap into the resources that are there. And I think with that, as parents, trust the work that you've done to get them prepared for this, and trust that they're going to go out and figure some of this out, make some mistakes, and learn from that. And I think finally, just breathe. Just breathe. It's going to be okay. How many of you have done this before? Look around the room quickly with those hands in the air. Tap into some of those resources right there. How many of you, this is your first time? Congratulations. This is pretty exciting, right?
Thank you very much for your sage advice. I would like to just call your attention to the fact that the enrollment office, after a student declares their intention to study at the new school, whether it be in the College of Performing Arts, Parsons School of Design, or Eugene Lane College for Liberal Arts, shortly after May 1st, we will then begin communicating a very small bit from admission and enrollment, and more so is when it switches over to our student success colleagues, who will then help navigate the summer months. But we do send, about mid-May, something that we call the enrollment guide. And this is a play-by-play preparation book for what to expect, the boxes that need to be checked, quite literally, forms that need to be prepared, so that when your student arrives to campus in late August, they're starting off on the right foot from an administrative point of view, again, with having all of the right documentation in for whatever offices, health offices, and housing, and so on. So again, we don't just leave you hanging. We do provide a resource to help guide you along the way, and it's also available online, and then we also email it, a digital issue as well as the analog copy to your home, so that you can, whatever your comfort level navigating, again, analog or digital, you'll have it in both versions, so that everybody can look at it together and talk about it over dinner. Again, as you prepare for this next step of your child's journey towards college. Again, we don't have a lot of time together, so I would like to open up the floor to questions now. We have some help from our admissions counselors who are going to run mics so that your questions can be heard by all of our guests, because chances are these very things are on their mind too, so we can all benefit from hearing each other's concerns and the answers from our distinguished panelists up front.
Hi, good morning, or good afternoon, I should say. Good afternoon. This may not be the right forum, but I'm going to throw it out there because it's something that struck me doing my research. My daughter and I were just talking about it. The student-to-faculty ratio, according to what I've seen, it's 16-1. And we just went to a school yesterday, which is 10 times the student body size with the exact same ratio. So I'm kind of curious, how does that work in this environment? Because the statistics for two different sizes of student bodies is almost identical.
Well, having worked at another institution much larger than this, I can tell you counting happens differently at different places. A number of faculty on the books, on the payroll at a particular institution does not mean that those faculty are actually engaged with the student experience directly, particularly undergraduates. And I can tell you the new school count speaks to the faculty who are actually working in the classroom with students. They're not counting research fellows who are in some lab somewhere. It's faculty who are working with the students who have chosen to get educated here. They're in the classrooms with our students. Now, if anyone has anything else to say about that.
I would say, in my experience here, we're a high-touch campus, meaning it's not just the faculty, it's also the administrators and staff who are working directly with the students to help them navigate and support, more so than I've seen elsewhere, and I've worked at some pretty large institutions. And so I think we definitely take pride in that as well, that it's a large team approach to help that student be successful.
In a question you didn't ask, but I don't know if I'm extrapolating from your question, we do in our Parsons space and our performing arts space employ a lot of adjunct faculty who are practicing professionals who come to teach a course or two, but they're not full-time here.
Yes, I had a question about the HEOP program. When I was looking online after my daughter had declared Lang, it seemed that she had missed the deadline for that, and I wanted to know if there are circumstances where she could still be able to apply with that.
Unfortunately, no. If she's already been admitted to Lang through traditional admissions, then we passed the opportunity for her to be looked at. But we can also talk at the end if you have some specific questions to ask. For New York State resident students who meet a particular profile, there's an additional support structure here for them. Higher Education Opportunity Program. Well, we can talk.
In the front here, Alex.
I guess you guys should.
Hi. I was very excited because so much of the school seems to meet my daughter's personality and temperament. But going back maybe to one thing you brought up with the previous questioner, I saw in my research that only about 12% of the faculty is full-time and about 88% or so is adjunct or part-time, which right now in academia there's a lot of debate about what that implies and how it works out. Can you speak a little bit about that?
I actually don't know the statistics for the number of full and part-time faculty at Lang. But what I can tell you is there are a core of part-time faculty that teach here routinely and have for over the course of years. And so they keep a teaching practice here. Very often you find that a lot of the people who are teaching are also, and this is a term we use here for everyone, so not just for Lang, but also for Parsons, there are people here who are making, right? They are working and making, and so in their lives they are also working in their field and bringing that practice into the classroom. There is a core group of full-time faculty at Lang. Those are many of the people who serve as faculty advisors for students, and it also allows for a robust curriculum so that the curriculum is really contemporary and changing regularly to sort of bring in what students are looking for when they are looking to come to Lang and study things that are happening in a really timely way. But specific to the statistic, I'm not exactly sure how many are at Lang full-time and part-time.
We could certainly,
Yeah.
I can give you my card and we can follow up with our institutional research team. All of the statistics that you access online are actually university-wide. They're not broken down by college and graduate school. So they're representative of the whole 10,000 students rather than the particular kind of educational experience someone might have at Lang versus College of Performing Arts versus Parsons versus NSSR and so on. So happy to give you my card, and we can follow up with our colleagues and break it down.
Really like the seminar idea. The one question I had is my daughter goes to a school that also has kind of a similar setup. And one of the things that came up is that when you have very small classes that, you know, many of the students who wanted that class don't get in. So I'm wondering like how difficult it is, let's say the really popular course taught by the teacher everyone loves and only takes 12 people, you know, and maybe only offered every other year. How difficult is it to get your first choice, and how often are kids not getting? I think someone else mentioned that there was a problem once with getting into their classes because there was some snafu and he ended up in a whole bunch of classes he didn't sign up for, and it wouldn't have been his first choice. So wondering how often that stuff comes up.
For first-year students, we are working to increase course offerings, and what our registration process is going to look like is once a student has that sort of introductory meeting with an advisor, whether, again, it be in person or through Zoom, we're going to send out a preference form to students, and it's going to have a listing of the first-year writing requirement, the first-year seminar, all different topics, and a series of electives, and they're going to order their preferences on that form, and that's going to be sent back to us, and then we're going to register them based on the preferences. We just went through that process this past year, and what I can tell you is that over 50% of the students who completed the preference form on time were registered in courses of their preference. They weren't always their first choice, but between their first and fifth choice, they found themselves in courses that they selected. If it was not in a course that they selected specifically because that course just was full, then the effort was made to find them a course in the discipline. So we're always looking to make sure that there are opportunities for students to have a wide array of choices within the curriculum, really experiment through the first year liberal arts curriculum, but also take the kinds of things they want to take. So I would say that it doesn't happen all the time, but sure, people get closed out of courses. Absolutely does happen. So, you know, we're working to add sections, we're working to add seats. Sometimes when there are really popular courses, we can work with course planning to add seats. We just need to understand what the need is that students have. That woman in the back was one of the first to raise her hand. Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. This question's for the student. Our student is down to his last two choices. He's trying to decide, so he's doing pros and cons. I don't know if you went through the same thing or if you only applied here, but what made you decide to come here?
Good question.
I mean, it's slightly different for me because I'm over at COPA. But what I usually recommend to students is follow a teacher rather than an institution name. Like for me, it was a decision between conservatories, but the teacher I really jived with was here. And these are people who are going to guide you through, especially during the first couple of years that you're in this degree. Those are formative years, so you're going to want to be working with somebody who you know you get along with, who is compatible with you in terms of teaching. So if you have an opportunity to reach out to a teacher, I would definitely recommend doing that. But yeah, no, I would recommend to follow a teacher rather than an institution name, for sure. Yeah.
And while we get the mic to the next question, I'll ask a follow-up. Devin, what keeps you here other than your teacher?
I mean, there's so much. For one thing, being part of the new school, I have access to all the different schools. Like, even though I'm a musician, I still have to take liberal arts courses. So I do take some courses here. But I have access to electives at Parsons. And other than that, the student body is accepting, welcoming, supportive, which is hard to find sometimes, which is surprising to me, but it's true. And also, location, location, location. This is New York City, and not only is it New York City, it's the West Village. It really doesn't get better than this, at least for me. As a classical musician, it's hard to find performance opportunities and just the lifestyle that you can find here. So, I mean, those are the big ones for me, for sure.
Okay. Dina, you want to get the mic to the next person for the next question?
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Could you talk about the advising structure, number of advisors, and the frequency of student-to-advisor contact?
So there are, as I said in the beginning, there's a sort of circle of advising support available specifically to first-year students, but then students all the way through. So for first-year students, every student is assigned a student success advisor. So those are the professional advisors that are part of central administration here. And we are available to students to help make sure they're registered properly for courses, to talk about curriculum tracking, degree requirements, et cetera. Every first-year student is registered for a Lang first-year seminar. The instructor for that seminar is their faculty advisor for the first year. And assigned to that class is a peer. So there are a group of Lang continuing students called first-year fellows who are assigned to courses, and they are there with that first-year instructor, working with students, helping with transitional issues, helping build community, helping them understand from a student perspective what the curriculum process might have been like for them, sharing their major and their experiences. Every sophomore student is assigned a full-time faculty advisor. Embedded in courses for upper-level students is also a faculty advising component. And so it's called integrated advising, and what it means is that of the full-time faculty, they will designate in the courses that they are teaching particular times and courses to meet with and talk to every student in that course. That might be about a major, or it just might be a point to check in. It might just be an opportunity to talk. Once a student declares a major, or at the junior level and through the senior level, there are departmental advising opportunities available to students at Lang. The frequency with which students have access to any and all of those advisors are as much as they'd like. For us in student success, for first-year students, we'd like that to be at least twice a semester. So once before the spring registration process, and then a reg appointment to prepare to register for spring, because registration will change in spring. That preference form that I discussed earlier, where we send that out during the summer and then we are registering students, that's a very different process for students who register from fall to spring. They will be competing in web registration or competitive registration along with everyone else, and registration is determined based on, the start of registration, I should say, is determined based on priority, so it's based on number of credits. And so usually first-year students are registering at the later part of the priority window. But there are specific classes that are available for them that other students aren't going to take. Faculty advising, again, can happen with a great deal of frequency. It all depends on the student and the faculty and the relationship that they try to develop. But we are looking to meet with them at least twice in the fall and twice in the spring, but as frequently as they would like. We have events, like we do kind of like social events to get them to come in, to help understand how we're available to them, to get to know them, to build a cohort, but at least those 2 times a semester.
I have a question. I was very impressed over here. Woo! Oh, okay. I was very impressed looking at the course descriptions, and I assume those are first-year courses that you had up in the other auditorium. They're very interdisciplinary. They look incredibly fun. But I was wondering how transferable they are. I know that you are not in the business of transferring students out, the opposite. But students do transfer, so I was wondering if there are articulation agreements or if there's any effort to align courses in a certain way to enhance transferability.
We don't have articulation agreements around transfer because, to your point, we want everybody to stay, right, if it's working. But what happens is definitely a C or better is going to be more transferable for any student at any college or university. So that's the grade threshold that they should be looking at. And then the institution that they're transferring to will evaluate. Courses, the way courses read here, they do read differently, but they do fall into disciplines. And so if it is needed to help another institution understand whether that's a psych course or a writing course or a science course, that assistance is available to students.
Thanks.
And as the mic is traveling to the next question, I just follow up by saying, as someone who's read her fair share of transfer applications over my 20-plus year history. I've been on the receiving end of applications from Lang, but I've also read students seeking transfer to Lang. And the courses are transferable to any other liberal arts college. The tricky bit is if a student changes their mind from something like anthropology to business, perhaps not all of them would go and they would be capped at 12 to 15 elective credits. But an anthropology course will transfer as an anthropology course more often than not. Each course has, as part of a syllabus, and some schools will require syllabi as part of the transfer process, there are learning outcomes that must be demonstrated for each course. And so the receiving university, or in the case when we review transfer applicants to Eugene Lang College, we are looking to see if the student is prepared for our curriculum here, which is writing intensive and reading heavy. So does every student who comes in to the new school get all of their credits? Not always, though we like to think we're fairly generous, on the generous end of transfer credit. And the converse is probably also true. Not every single course will be transferable elsewhere, but liberal arts to liberal arts is a good bet. It's when a student changes to engineering or something that's very, very specific that we don't have an equivalent on offer here.
So to build on what you just said, I have sort of two questions, but they're related. So if you can treat them as one, I think it'll work. So my first question is actually about the first-year retention rate, which is just kind of average here. It's like 76%, which is fine. Not everybody fits into the college they pick. But so the first part of the question is, why do you think that's, who leaves? Who does this work for? Who do you see leaving? And my second question is, what do you have to offer a kid like mine who's also interested in innovation and creativity, but he also is really interested in things like Greek and Roman history and things like, looking backward too, right? Because we're not reinventing the wheel. So can a kid take classes elsewhere in New York if you don't offer them? So that's my question.
I think we'll actually treat it as two different questions, because I think Keisha can speak better to the latter half, and then I'll come back and do the first.
There are a couple. There's the opportunity through the consortium with Cooper Union. There is some opportunity for students to take classes there and vice versa, so there's that. I like to say also, too, though, for a student like the one you're describing, the university suits that purpose, right? If a student is interested in being innovative and creative, there are ways within the curriculums that are offered through Parsons and through other parts of the university that they might be able to meet those needs. And I think, as was shared in the larger presentation, university minors are a way for students to also enhance what it is they're trying to do. Within Lang, there is the self-design major for a student who really just feels like, and it's a rigorous process, let me just say, but who really feels like the curriculum as is doesn't quite meet what they're looking for, and they are then really willing, able, and ready to put in the work to help design the curricular path that they want to pursue. And there's a process for that. There's a proposal process, a very rigorous review of that, and they'd work along with faculty. But again, I'd like to think that the university could really support a student who has varied interests and who wants to learn in very different types of ways. What we're really working on is helping a student understand that at least their first year should be a Lang-based first year. Right, and so to really understand what a traditional liberal arts curriculum allows for you to do, and then to start to use that as a foundation to broaden their learning and to stretch out in the university and perhaps in other ways. The other piece I'll add to that is maybe not necessarily taking courses elsewhere, but finding learning opportunities elsewhere. So internships, study abroad are the ways in which people really find robust learning accompaniment to what they're doing with their Lang courses.
So to your question about the retention rate, so the rate at which students return between first and second year, we're actually at 82% now. And again, all of our statistics that we publish are university-wide, they're not college-specific. So just keep in mind that would include musicians who stop out because they get an opportunity to tour, actors who may have similar opportunities. It could be for personal reasons, health reasons, family reasons, and then it could just plain be not the right match, which happens. I mean, I suspect that none of the students and probably very few of the parents who are here today are surprised by the culture of the new school because it is so very distinct from most other colleges and university settings. But there are students who choose to go to college for reasons that may not be in their best interest, to follow a friend, because they knew somebody who went here, because of its location, and there's, I'm sure a million other versions. But it does happen that students leave, and we do work to find the best placement for them. We don't want them to be in an environment that is not conducive to their development. That's not to say any college environment should be easy, because students will not grow if they're not challenged. So there's a difference between not the fit and not a fit and being too hard. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. There's a distinction between the two.
And the allure of the city and the life of living and studying in the city sometimes is a real challenge for people as well.
And I think that speaks to the support services, which all of us work with those students. We have these ideas that our students are going to excel and they're going to do great and they're never going to have an issue. Those issues are going to come up, and that's why we exist when behavioral issues come up, when mental health issues come up. And there are times that we have to say, maybe right now isn't the best time. Let's figure out what else that you want to do, you need to do to take some time off. But we're here to support you through that process. And you're just a little bit further away from us, but we're an extension of that, making sure you get back on track to come back to the new school or to figure out which school you want to go to or take a gap year or something to that effect. But there is 24 hours 24/7 around the clock staff here who are supporting your students, especially when they're trying to figure out, how do I even go talk to that faculty member or that advisor, or you know what, I'm just feeling homesick, and how do I navigate that? And there's a whole team behind the scenes who are doing that type of work too.
Okay. Whoever has the mic next.
Hi, just briefly. One is, as you talked about the email for the student to check continually, that's really not going to happen for my daughter. I have her password, ID, login, the hub. I find it a bit difficult. How can I be part of the email or just, be with her email password and all of that? And do I need her permission to you guys to let me know if something's up that I'm not aware of, even though I live in the city?
Who wants this question?
Well, I mean, I will just state a fact that right now, email is the official method of communication at this university amongst our own administration and faculty and to students, whether they check it or not. That's how the information is disseminated. They can also check regularly on their hub where the same information is housed. But we can't text students. We can't text students, unfortunately. We're trying to meet them where they are and the way through they communicate. And we do understand there is a disconnect. I could pass on for the rest of the bit. I mean, if you're logging on already, you're seeing what you need to see. There will be a point at which your student will have to give you a waiver for access to her information on campus, which would include grades and anything else that's private in nature if the student's over 18. So, but that's not too far off.
And if she changes her password and doesn't tell you and then doesn't check her email, I'm concerned. And so why don't you and I talk afterwards? We'll connect. I'm not going to have an answer for you, but we're going to work on ways that you can strategize with her.
Just lastly, for taking 6 months or a year abroad, just where should we go to talk about the requirements? Thanks.
Yeah, our Global International Service Office would be that office to support you. I directly work with them. We can connect after if you want to talk more, but it's on our website. It talks about the requirements. It talks about all the different opportunities. Each school has those opportunities, and then we have centralized some of those logistical and liability type things that we want students and parents to think through and fill out all the forms and those types of things. But you would work with a school advisor on those types of opportunities and really figure out what works for your student and the curriculum. You'd also work with their academic advisor to make sure that all that fits within the academic plan that they're on. Because what we don't want them to do is go abroad, come back and say, I want these credits, and they don't actually apply to the program that they're in. Good question.
Okay.
Who has mics?
I do, I guess. Thank you for a super informative day. It's been really helpful. What's the school's overall approach to student wellness, stress, anxiety, mental health?
It's a big part of what we do. We recognize all the way from the admissions application to the time that they get here that they are people and there's a lot going on for them. We have a counseling center on campus, a student health services on campus. In each of those offices, they have peer advisors that are there to support those students if they're not so comfortable talking to a counselor right yet. We have 24/7 coverage in the residence halls and off-campus students for crisis response related issues that funnels all the way up through me to navigate that and figure out how best. And there will be times that if we reach out to you that it's a pretty serious situation, saying this is the type of situation, this is possibly where your student is, if we have to transport them to the hospital or not. But those resources, because we're in New York City, are right around us. But that counseling center is nonstop available and there to support the students, not only with psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists, but also self-help support for those students. If they just want to learn how to de-stress, that's not necessarily going into a full therapeutic appointment, but those resources are here and it's a big part of what we do. It's that holistic approach to the student. Our students are so unique and so excited to be here, and some of them want to be here because this has been their dream forever, and once they get that dream, then how do I navigate that? And so we do a lot of work, especially in the residence halls, with the academic advisors, with all the staff, just how are students transitioning? Because those first 6 weeks can be kind of challenging for many of our students, right? So programs and services, orientation and welcome week are going to be those ways that we kick some of that off. Others?
I have a micro question that builds on the last question, which was my main question, then a follow-up on something that concerned me. The micro question is, once my daughter enrolls, do I drop her from my health insurance? Because there's the health services fee and all that. Is that comprehensive health insurance for the next 4 years or not? And while you contemplate that, my other question was, that statistic that you cited that 50% of students get up to their 5th choice, that means half the students don't even get their 5th choice on their first semester. What is that like for if they're taking 4 courses, they don't even get their first choice on any of the 4 courses they're going to take? Or can you just elaborate on that statistic? Because it has me a little fearful.
Got you. Okay, I didn't mean to shake you, I'm sorry. So let me ask about the insurance. You should evaluate the plan that the university offers. There is a comprehensive health insurance opportunity that you can engage, and then you can decide whether you want to continue to carry, you said your daughter, right? Carry your daughter on your insurance or move her to the university insurance, and that information will be shared with you. The fee that you pay, the fee is for everyone to have access to the university services here. So the health services, counseling services, nutritional services, groups, therapy groups, those kinds of things. And so they're two separate things. So no, over 50% of the students, or at least 50% of the students, got one of their top 5 choices in one of the sections. Across the board, students were able to get a preferenced course. But in the event that a preferenced course was not available, again, our work was then to find courses in the disciplines that students cited interest in. And so we worked really hard. To be very honest with you, it was a manual process. The registrar manually registered over 480 some odd students. And so we worked really hard to make sure that students found themselves in courses that they either expressed an interest in, or course disciplines that they expressed an interest in, or specific courses that were on the preference form. But in some cases, for instance, no particular groups all got the same preference form, so there were about 40 students per form. So in an event that you got a form that didn't have a course that we thought you might be interested in, then we were able to place students in courses that were, again, in the same discipline. And so we were able to talk through the process, use advising as a way to find out what it is the students were trying to do, and get them into courses. The other piece we know about this process is that when we looked at grade distribution at the end of the fall semester, over 70% of the students that we surveyed had an A or B in their courses, whether they were in courses that they picked as part of a preference or they were in a discipline of their preference. So we feel like that process was really successful, and it allowed for a really high-touch advising conversation, and that's ultimately what we want. We want to be having conversations with the students about what the first year looks like and how to best access the curriculum.
And two quick follow-ups to Keisha. The health insurance waiver is a very rigorous process because we have found that students who have waived out with their parents' involvement have then arrived here, sought medical treatment, and it turns out they were not covered. So the process by which a family needs to register their insurance coverage information and the coverage area is quite rigorous. So if that's something that you're looking at, just be prepared for that, because we don't want any student to arrive here without coverage. It puts a family in a terrible position financially, on top of all of the other issues associated with that student's health. So it's a stressor that we do not want to contribute to. And the second bit is Lang is an open curriculum. There's a lot of freedom, but it doesn't mean that there aren't required courses. Right. And in the first year, there's a required writing course that everyone must take, whether or not they want to. So I don't know if that's figuring into the choice or not. And then there are also university seminars, university-wide seminars called ULEX that, again, these are required to meet graduation requirements, but it's not a core requirement in the traditional sense where a student has to have a quantitative science, a natural science, a Western, non-Western civ, social science, foreign language, et cetera. There's a lot of freedom, but that doesn't mean that there isn't some structure. So the first year choices are choices indeed, but it's not like a free rodeo of choices. There's some structure in the choices students will get.
Go ahead.
So like everybody else, my daughter has gone on multiple college tours in and out of New York, a couple in New York City. And this school seems to be her fit. She loves it. She keeps coming back here. But of course, tuition, room and board is a concern. Being a single mom, 2 kids in college, she's going to have to pay her own way. So my question is, I know as a freshman you have to live on campus, but if she chooses, which she probably will because of the room and board cost, if she chooses to move off campus for the rest of the 3 years, she did get some scholarship money. Will she lose that scholarship money and grant moving off campus to help her not pay so much towards a student loan?
I'll speak to the scholarship, and then Travis, you can take it from there. So the scholarships that students were awarded as part of their offer of admission are merit-based, and that scholarship is only good towards the student's tuition and fees. It does not touch a student's housing preferences, options, or whether they live at home or with family in the local area. So a student's choice to be in residence at one time, never, half and half, has nothing to do with the student's eligibility to maintain their scholarship. There are academic criteria called satisfactory academic progress that we ask students to maintain a 2.0 GPA, which is not unattainable, and full-time enrollment, which for liberal arts college, Eugene Lang is 12 credits.
And for the housing piece, it's not a requirement for first years to live on campus. So if she finds more affordable options off campus that would suit more of her needs, then she's more than welcome to do that. But obviously, would love to have as many first years on campus as possible, but we know it's not feasible for everyone.
For graduation required courses, if they're closed out, does the faculty have or the advisors have like what's like a special permission to grant access to that student to be enrolled in that class?
We have exceptions, and so it'll either be that an exception for a particular course or another course that fits the criteria, but we make sure that people get what they need to graduate.
And I mean, maybe this is, harping on something that doesn't need to be harped on, but we don't have 600 students majoring in psychology at this university. So it is very, very rare as a student progresses through their education that they're going to be competing. The students' interests are so individual and tailored to their own investigation that I have not heard it from parents or students, especially those in their third and fourth years, that they're missing out on a seat in a class, because each student's path is so incredibly different. There isn't a, it's not a lockstep kind of curriculum like other colleges have, where you must have this, that, and the other. There's a menu from which to choose, and the student very much is in charge of the courses that they want. But there's not going to be forced courses, except unless you want to call, first year writing forced. We think it's a building block that every student needs to be successful here, and then the university seminar.
What I would add, though, for instance, the Journalism Plus Design program at Lang is growing exponentially. And so there are a certain set of courses in that structure, and that's probably one of the more prescribed curricular pathways at Lang. There's some competition for those courses. And so what is really important, right, that gives me the opportunity to circle back to advising, right? That's why it's really important that they're coming in for regular advising appointments and talking to advisors about their pathway, so that they can plot out what they want to take, what they need to take, what are some substitutions, how might an internship fit in. Like, they really need to be coming in. And so if nothing else, like if that's the takeaway, go back and say, the advisor is really key to your planning and your success. And so advisors are going to be looking for pathways instead of obstacles. And so really, that's really important. Politics is an area at Lang where the capstone is only offered one time a year. So if a student doesn't take the capstone at the right time, it could look like they need to come back for an extra semester. So conversations about planning for your capstone in politics is really important. So if you could just, encourage and think about how advising works to support students in that way.
That's that partnership we ask you to be in with us, right? And understanding for at least all of you, especially those who their students not paying attention to the email, Mama, we know who we are, right? We're going to talk. But helping them understand that calendar and asking where we are in that calendar. Have they made an appointment with their advisor? Because this is what happens. If we wait to the last minute, no one's going to get what they want, right? And so it's about, how do we plan ahead? How do we start thinking about that next step while they're in the current step? And that, for us, are some of those life skills we're trying to teach them, because everyone signs up for Keisha to meet with her on the same day. Not everyone can meet with Keisha on the same day. And then what we get, and it usually makes it to my office, is we can't get an appointment with Keisha, and I'm the mom, and I want to have an appointment. I can't make an appointment for you. I can help you and your student navigate that. But the more you can help them plan ahead and you understand the academic calendar, that's going to help us partner.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and then I just want to say we will stick back for a few minutes if there are individual concerns that you want to bring to us. And what's that? Two? Well, as long as the group thinks that's fine, then we're happy to stay. Yes, of course.
Okay. My son got accepted into the COPA Jazz Studies, very specific. And does this all apply to him as far as like, I know he's the writing course, but is he going, like, what else is his curriculum going to look like that he has to do?
Yeah, so you're going to have to do your liberal arts studies, I believe it's 12 credits for a requirement right now.
Okay.
ULEX, yes. Also, there's, at least for Manus, I can't speak particularly to the jazz department.
Okay.
There are new proficiency courses as well, which are courses that are still in your realm of interest, but kind of start making you think about music outside of what you're comfortable with.
Okay.
Like I took orchestration class, stuff like that. I mean, it was a cool class. It taught me that I'm a terrible orchestrator, but it still got me thinking about music in a different way, which is really important for any artist.
Yeah, and my son talks a lot about the practice rooms, you know, and so how long are they open? And I'm like the safety of him going from, you know, the dorm to those practice rooms are they open really late and things like that?
Well, Arnold Hall closes, depending on what time of year it is. Like now it is open 24 hours just because we're at the end of the semester. Things like juries and recitals are coming up.
Okay.
But there are practice rooms at the University Center that are open 24 hours. There are also practice rooms in some of the dorms as well.
Okay, and the safety, like walking from...
I mean, I've never felt unsafe, especially in this neighborhood. So I really, and there's always security at the doors, so you don't have to worry about just random people coming in. But like I said, it's a safe area. I've really never felt unsafe myself. I haven't heard of anybody else feeling unsafe, but yeah.
And the last question I have is just the housing. Are they able to be just like live on campus one semester, or they have to sign for the whole year?
It is a one-year agreement, so
It is a one-year,
yeah, fall
okay.
and spring.
Last one?
Okay.
My question centered around what would be a typical daily schedule for a freshman student. So my daughter intends to do the art and context program. Well, she'll have possibly 2 majors or 2 areas of focus. And we went in to look at some of the theater courses and was surprised to see the number that are actually evening classes and even weekend classes. And so I'm just wondering if you could talk about, you know, is it a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you know, you meet for an hour for a course and then Tuesday, Thursday for 2 hours, or what should they expect their typical days to be like as a freshman?
So for one, all Lang students come in as liberal arts majors and undeclared. And so though she's preferenced arts and context as her intended area of interest, she's not going to really see that as part of her curricular studies in the first 2 semesters. Definitely not the first semester, maybe a little bit more toward the second semester, depending on what she's able to register for. After that, it really varies. Classes are 5 days a week. We're actually moving to a new bell schedule in the fall, which is going to include a lot more 8 a.m. classes, a lot more Friday classes, and a lot more evening classes. So it's totally possible for a student to be here, you know, into the evening. Classes generally meet on a 2-day schedule, you know, hour and 40 minutes a session, and so Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, and the Friday will play. I'm not sure how the Friday will play in. I guess maybe a Wednesday, Friday or something like that, because it's still new. But she could be here a couple days a week. She could be here taking class every day. It really varies. Also, too, keeping in mind that she might have other interests that keep her in the campus community throughout the day. She could work as well. So there are a lot of reasons to be here, just using the spaces to study and to make and create, because all students are doing that. So it definitely is going to be a 5 to 6 day week, definitely.
And would you say, Keisha, that as the student progresses, they will engineer their schedule to perhaps
I mean, that even
be
happens in the
weekend
beginning. That happens in the
because
beginning.
they want to do an internship,
Yeah,
or they
yeah.
have some other.
When the students get the preference form, they're going to be able to log into the university website and read course descriptions and look in days at times. And so they might really work hard in their preference selections to be like, I really want a Monday, Wednesday schedule. And that will be facilitated as much as possible. Definitely happens with more frequency as the student moves through.
And our hope is that the students will also find ways to get involved in the community, make friends, join clubs and organizations, create clubs and organizations that are of their interest, and that we know the classroom experience is pretty rigorous, and we're hoping for ways that they can de-stress and find ways to socialize and be part of the larger community.
Okay, I want to thank you for your very thoughtful and challenging questions this afternoon.